Make sure you achieve a good paste covering. By lining up the edge of the paper with your paste table, you can avoid getting any paste onto the table. Folding the pasted face together will make it easier to carry the paper up the steps or ladder. Line up the paper with the ceiling or coving. Cross-lining paper always goes across the width of the wall, not from top to bottom. Smooth down with your paper hanging brush. Make sure any bubbles or creases are removed. Cut and paste your next piece. Leave a 1 or 2 millimeter gap between each piece of paper, otherwise you'll see the join through your top decorative wall covering. Internal corners should be cut, but external corners can be papered around with one complete piece of paper. If severe creases are apparent, don't attempt to brush these out. Peel the paper away from the wall and reapply by brushing it back down in small sections, as demonstrated. Continue to cross-line the rest of the room. Leave to dry completely before attempting to hang your decorative wall covering. Once the room has been completely cross-lined, it's time to start paper hanging. In this instance, we're going to decorate the room with 2 different papers, dividing these up with a decorative border paper. Measure the length where the border will be placed, in this case at dado height, and square around the room with a spirit level. Measure off widths of the wallpaper in order to avoid having to fix a small narrow piece at one end. If this is the case, start with the narrower cut-down piece of paper, as in this example. Measure the desired distance from the corner, and square off with a spirit level. Never assume that the corner of the room is square. Work to your true vertical line. Now measure the length of the piece of paper that will be required. Cut this length from the roll. Always make sure your paste table is clean. Sponge down with clean water. Square off the measured length and cut with scissors. Always allow an extra 5 or 10 centimeters. Don't cut it to the exact length. Paste the paper, making sure that all the edges are covered. Now, carefully remove the pasted paper from the pasteboard. Line up the edge of the paper with your vertical line. Smooth the paper over with your damp sponge. Make sure that you remove any creases or bubbles with the sponge. Run the edge of your scissors over the paper so as to mark ready for cutting. Peel the paper away from the wall and carefully cut along the mark. Now finally, smooth it back into place with your sponge. Paste up another length of paper in readiness. The pasted edges can be folded together for easy handling. Apply this to the wall, taking care to match up your pattern. Open out the length. Here we've cut a small hole in the paper to allow for a wall light cable. Check the position of the cable and make a small hole in the paper. Thread the cable through the hole. Smooth down the paper with your damp sponge as before. Continue around the room until the top half of the border paper is complete. Papering below the border is exactly the same. Square down the joint from the paper already hung in the corner of the room. Measure the paper width. Mark this onto the paper. Remember to add a few extra centimeters. Now cut this. Paste the length of the paper and position it up against the wall. Don't forget to match up your pattern. Now smooth down with a damp sponge. Trim to size. Sponge the paper back into the corner. If you find you have to paper around switches or plugs, isolate the main power supply whilst decorating. Remove the fitting and paper over the hole. When the paper's dry, locate and trim with a pair of scissors. Now it's time to fix our border paper. With a spirit level, draw a line around the room at dado height. Apply a good quantity of paper adhesive to the border paper. Now fix this to the wall, leveling up with the pencil line. Trim to size. And finally, smooth it down with your sponge. In a lot of cases, you may have to remove a radiator to decorate. Here, we're going to show you how to do this. Turn off the water flow valves. If the radiator has a thermostatic radiator valve fitted, remove the valve head and fit the sealing off cap. Now loosen with grips. Place a bowl underneath the valve. The radiator will begin to drain. Open up the bleed valves to drain down completely. The air intake will force the water out of the radiator. Place tissue into the radiator valves to stop any drips of water when you remove it from the wall. The radiator is now ready to remove. To replace or refit the radiator, apply sealing paste to the valves. Now hand tighten the nuts. Finally, tighten the valves with grips. Replace the thermostatic radiator valve head, open both of the valves, and bleed the radiator to remove the air.